So, namaskar friends, let us start lecture number 13. Friends, in the last lecture we discussed about wisdom, emotion, mindfulness and a lot of things that are very important for a balanced approach in our life. Well, in the modern times our intelligence is not measured only in terms of IQ, that is intelligence quotient, but also in terms of our EQ, that is emotional quotient. That means emotion is very important. A person who is devoid of emotion certainly may not be called a human being. It is our emotional faculty that makes us human, that makes us sensitive, that makes us wise. But excess of emotion at times is considered to be a hindrance, especially in taking professional decisions. So, that is the reason there is lot of talk about emotional intelligence. What emotional intelligence exactly means and how this is cultivated? Well, the Indian knowledge system provides us wonderful explanation of that, and there are examples that will make us aware of emotional intelligence. So, here we go. We begin with a classic example of emotional intelligence, and where can we find it better than in the epic Mahābhārata. All of us are aware that Ayodhya is in a mood of celebration. Their beloved Rama is going to be coronated as their next king, and at that point in time the unthinkable happens. Kaikeyi, the stepmother of Rama, tells her husband Dashrath that she needs her boon to be granted, which was earlier promised. And as part of her boon, she insists that Bharat, her own son, should be coronated as the king of Ayodhya. Ram instead should be sent to Ban, that is forest, for 14 years. Obviously, this is so devastating for the whole of Ayodhya subjects. Just think of Ram, who is going to be affected by that. Had he been a normal human being, how he could have reacted? Probably he could have fought, probably he could have questioned this injustice meted out to him, but it is Lord Ram. His reactions at that critical crucial moment are the best example of emotional intelligence. Let us see the most profound illustrations of emotional intelligence, as I said, in Indian epic tradition, is when Ram comes to know about his coronation's cancellation and the dictate that he should immediately depart for forest for 14 years. As he enters Kaikeyi's chamber, expecting to receive blessings before his consecration as king, he encounters an emotionally devastated Dashrath. Dashrath is so in grief that he is not able to speak, and he also encounters Kaikeyi, his stepmother, who coldly announces the demand of the boons he had earlier been promised by King Dashrath, that Bharat will be crowned and Ram must go into exile. Tat apriyam amitraghno bachanam maranopamam shrutvam na bibyathe Ramah Kaikeyi idam bravit. Shrutva na bibyathe Ramah Kaikeyi idam abravit. Hearing those words, painful like death, Ram was not shaken and spoke thus to Kaikeyi. As I said friends, had Ram been like any of us, he could have reacted sharply. But no, although these words are very painful like death to him, he still maintains his composure and talks to his mother Kaikeyi. The text does not imply emotional numbness. So, do not get confused that one has to be emotionally numb in order to be emotionally intelligent. As I said, our capability to emotionally understand a situation or emotionally respond to a situation is what makes us human. If we suffer emotional numbness, we cease to be humans. Nor does it suggest that Ram felt no grief. Everybody would feel grief for that matter if unexpected things happen with him or her. So, Ram is also grief stricken, but then does he fall to the ground? Does he start lamenting, thumping on his chest that everything is lost for him? No, he suppresses those chaotic emotions, controls his emotions and acts brilliantly and rationally in this situation. So, it presents a sophisticated model of affective regulation in which emotional upheaval does not immediately convert into impulsive speech or reactive conduct. So, that is why I said this is going to be one of the most suitable beginning points for our understanding of emotional intelligence. एवमस्तु गमिष्यामि वनं वस्तु महं तत जटाचीरधरः राज्ञः प्रतिज्ञाम् अनुपालयन्. So be it, I shall go to the forest wearing bark and matted hair, upholding the king's promise. This is what Lord Ram says. This moment should be read critically as an act of cognitive reframing. Friends, cognitive reframing is a technique in psychology in which we keep our emotions in check and regulate our emotions. Ram does not interpret the event through the language of personal injustice. Instead, he immediately relocates the crisis into the framework of Raj Dharma, that is, the dharma of a king and filial obligation. Does he have to think about his own self? Does he have to think about the lost opportunity? No, he has to behave in a very mature way. He has to uphold the tradition of Raj Dharma. He has to take care of the emotions of his stepmother. He also has to uphold the dignity of his father. His father has granted this boon under lot of compulsion. If Rama disobeys that, he may be insulting his father as well. So, Rama understands the deeper emotional field of the situation. His father's silence is itself a form of speech, a speech of helpless guilt, paternal love and moral collapse. Rama's composure protects his father from further humiliation. Also, his reaction with outrage would have thrown Ayodhya into immediate political and familial chaos. So, his response preserves the ethical ecology of the kingdom. And how this becomes possible? It becomes possible because of his emotional intelligence. Another example that comes from another epic, the Mahābhārata. In that, in the Udyog Parva, we find how Krishna, Lord Krishna demonstrates emotional intelligence at the level of political systems, wounded relationships and impending civilizational war. The Pandavas have completed their exile. Draupadi's humiliation remains an open wound. Duryodhana's envy has only deepened, knowing that they have come back, they have fulfilled their promises or the condition that was set for them, and the Kuru court stands divided between wisdom and ego. There are people who are saying that as per promise, half of the kingdom should be given to them and peace should be maintained, and there are people who say that an inch will not be given to them. So, there is a division between wisdom and ego, yet before consenting to war And Lord Krishna, all of us know, knows all the consequences, but he does not leave behind any opportunity to peacefully negotiate the situation before finally settling for the ultimate solution, that is the war. So, before consenting to war, Krishna insists on becoming a peace envoy, a peace messenger. This decision itself is psychologically profound. He is not naive about Duryodhana's character. He knows Duryodhana very, very well. Rather, he understands that emotionally mature leadership must exhaust the pathways of reconciliation before embracing destruction. That is why, even if he knows that Duryodhana will not agree to his peace proposal, being a mature diplomat or a mature person or leader, he thinks of exhausting all possible means before he takes a decision of war. A crucial emotional backdrop to his mission appears in Draupadi's conversation with him before the embassy. She reminds him of Yudhishthira's extraordinarily modest peace condition. She says, Panchamam cha yatha kamam gramam dadayat shuyodhanah. So, Krishna's peacemaking is far more than diplomacy. It is rooted in his deep understanding of the emotional architecture of Duryodhana's psyche. Duryodhana's problem is not land alone. It is sustained by humiliation, anxiety, entitlement, rivalry, and an ego incapable of processing shared legitimacy. So, certainly Duryodhana is far from emotionally intelligent. The paradox of Krishna's embassy is that he goes for peace while fully aware that war may be inevitable. So, he knows that Duryodhana will never accept his peace proposal, but still, being emotionally mature, he tries it one more time. Krishna's emotional intelligence lies in his refusal of both extremes. He knows that there is no possibility Duryodhana may be convinced, but then he does not want to unilaterally declare the war on this injustice. Before, of course, looking at all possible solutions to that. He neither collapses into rage over Draupadi's suffering nor clings to illusionary optimism about Duryodhana's reform. So, emotional intelligence is about realizing that emotional restraint. In the moments of emotional crisis, how you uphold your dignity, how you control your emotions, how you control your impulses, that is very, very important. So, it reveals a high form of emotional clarity. Krishna combines compassionate effort with realism about consequence. Although Krishna knows the consequence, still he makes sincere effort. He does not confuse peace with sentimental softness. He is not governed by Draupadi's charged words that compel him to declare a war against the Kauravas. No, he takes stock of that situation, but does not react impulsively. At the same time, he knows that there is no chance of peace without war, still tries to go for it. Why does Ram, hearing a command equal to death, remain inwardly composed, while Krishna still chooses dialogue even when conflict seems inevitable? Now, let us look at these two situations, and these two situations are situations of emotional crisis. And had Ram or Krishna been normal human beings, beings who lack emotional intelligence, their responses or reactions could have been different. But no, they are emotionally stable, intelligent, and that is why they do not lose their mind they do not lose their sanity even in the face of odds. But then let us try and find out what it is. Are these merely acts of patience, or do they reveal a deeper Indian understanding of how emotion must be interpreted before it is expressed? Well, passively suffering is not emotional intelligence, that we have to understand. Emotional intelligence teaches us how we can turn that suffering into some kind of learning and wisdom, and can make use of that in our future endeavors. So, can grief become dignity, and can anger be transformed into negotiation? People might ask this question because this is very difficult to do. When you are overcome by grief, it is difficult to keep your calm. When you are angry, it is difficult to negotiate with someone. These are two emotionally charged moments or vulnerable moments, and obviously it is very difficult to take control of them. The epics repeatedly compel us to ask, what preserves relationships, kingdoms, and even the self in the moments of emotional fire? What kind of behavior has to be there if one is charged by such emotional fire? Impulse or discernment? Should we act on impulse, or should we think over it and weigh and consider before we react? Ego or dharma? What is important? Is it the person who is important, or the greater good is important? Indian traditions do not see emotions as problems to be suppressed. Nowhere in the Indian tradition it is suggested that you suppress your emotions. No, they talk about channelizing your emotions in the right direction. They ask how emotions become wisdom, responsibility, and right actions. From the inner shock of Ayodhya to the political tension of Hastinapur, these moments open the doorway to a much larger civilizational psychology of emotional intelligence. And that is why, friends, I said that our Indian knowledge tradition gives us numerous such examples that can come handy in understanding the real meaning of emotional intelligence and the ways in which it can be effectively cultivated and executed in our professional and personal lives. Matra sparsastu kaunteya sitoshna sukh dukh da. What we call pleasure and pain, good and bad, comfort and discomfort, they arise first through contact and perception, and are by nature agam apaniya. They come and go, yet the mind does not let them remain transient. So, earlier also we have discussed that these are transitory moments, and we believe that they are our real natures, but then they are not our real nature. A passing criticism becomes insult, and people are not ready to forget it. A delayed response becomes rejection, a setback becomes failure of the self. Now, this kind of feeling certainly does not allow us to think intelligently emotion wise. So, Indian philosophy offers a profound distinction between raw experience and conceptual overlay. Sensation is immediate. Well, friends, in the emotionally charged moments, we have this sensation, we feel that sensation, but suffering grows when sensation hardens into narrative. If you allow that momentary sensation to percolate to everything that we do and make it part of our thinking process or our disposition, that narrative will make us feel insulted every time. If there is an insult, a momentary insult, and we never allow you to forget or to be forgotten, it becomes part of our self, and in the long run that keeps on harping on our mind and does not allow us to really think clearly and overcome this. So, Vedantic thought would recognize this as a kind of adhyasa, where we superimpose permanent meaning upon impermanent events. As I said, your true self, when we were talking about self awareness, we discussed this, that our true self is different from the transitory happenings, but sometimes these transitory labels become our true self. We think we are what our title is, what our status is, and we lose our real self in that quagmire. So, here again these temporary or impermanent happenings become permanent in our psyche, and forever they impact our behavior, disposition and thought process. The real philosophical question then is, am I responding to reality or to the story my mind has already built around it? If we take that one insulting incident to our heart and rewind it time and again, we never come out of it. We never see the positive side of it. We never see the ways of coming out of it. Yam hina vyathayantete purusham purusharshabha samadukha shukham dhiram sho amrit tattvaye kalpate. That means the dhir is not one who feels nothing. Dhir is somebody who has lot of patience and perseverance, but dhir is not one who feels nothing, but one who is not immediately carried away by the first emotional level, somebody who is not impulsive in actions and reactions. Buddhistic philosophy sharpens this through the idea of Vedana, the bare feeling tone of experience before the mind converts it into craving, resistance, shame, fear or anger. This is the crucial threshold where emotional intelligence is born, between feeling and story, between sensation and self definition. Well, you feel that Vedana and then you control your emotions of craving, resistance, shame, fear or anger before they become permanent in your nature. Emotional intelligence has that intercepting role. It falls between that immediate feeling, impulse or sensation and the ultimate story it turns into when it is allowed to prevail for a longer period of time. Indian emotional intelligence thus becomes the movement from Vedana to Viveka, from pain to discernment, not pain to story. In contemporary terms, this insight is profoundly relevant to breakups, job rejections, online outrage, public embarrassment and interpersonal misunderstandings, where we often react less to facts than to what those facts seem to say about our worth. Our reactions are so immediate that they never give us real time to think over the situation and get to the truth, and such reactions certainly belie any kind of emotional intelligence. Sankhya and Vedanta distinguish the psyche into manas. What is that manas? It is the sensing and oscillating mind. So, Sankhya and Vedanta distinguish our psyche into manas, that is the sensing or oscillating mind, Buddhi, the faculty of discernment and judgment, and Ahaṃkāra, the principle of I-ness or ego identification. Manas is the first responder of experience. It receives impressions, compares them, doubts, hesitates, reacts and moves between options. It is the space where the first wave of emotion rises. This feels unpleasant. Why did this happen? Something is wrong, etc. So, immediate reaction is this. Buddhi is the faculty of nischay, determination, vivek, discernment and judgment, the inner power that decides what something means and how one should act. So, after manas comes buddhi. If we do not allow a thought to travel from manas to buddhi and react, obviously our reactions will be immediate and impulsive. But when it travels to buddhi, we weigh and consider, and then we think what is the right thing to do. Ahaṃkāra is the layer that turns experience into self story. When you travel from manas to ahaṃkāra, you lack in buddhi. So, you do not have emotional intelligence in between to filter out your sensory perceptions or sensory emotions that you experienced first hand, and they become part of your thinking. So, ahaṃkāra is the layer that turns experience into self story. Here emotion becomes existential because the event is no longer just felt, it is absorbed into identity. You never forget that, and as a result it becomes part of your nature. So, emotional intelligence in the Indian sense lies in interrupting this chain before the ego monopolizes meaning. How? From manas it must go to buddhi, but then from buddhi it should not become part of ahaṃkāra. So, from manas to ahaṃkāra, if we can intercept in between using our buddhi, obviously much of the problems that arise out of our impulsive behavior may be controlled. One of the most suitable contributions of Indian psychology is the insight that emotions do not disappear after they are felt. They leave behind traces, grooves and latent impressions called Saṃskāras. Indian traditions do not see emotion as an isolated event, but as a pattern forming force. What we repeatedly feel, interpret and rehearse gradually becomes the architecture of our personality. So, we find that there are people who keep complaining, there are people who always look at the brighter side of things, there are people who remain indifferent to things. Now, this becomes part of their nature. The more the mind revisits a certain narrative, injury, comparison, craving, humiliation, the stronger the Saṃskāra becomes. Over time, we no longer choose the emotion chooses us through the force of repetition. If we always think about negative things, this becomes part of our nature. So, emotional intelligence is not only about managing the present feeling, it is also about recognizing which old emotional groove is being reactivated. Should we allow our negative experiences to spoil our life, or should we dump it forever and move forward? Indian thought has long recognized that emotional life is not uniform. It is shaped by constitution, tendency and dominant qualities of mind. So, just now I said that all of us are different, our thinking is different. So, our emotions are also different and our emotional challenges are also different. Earlier we talked about three character traits that are governed by three kinds of compositions in our body: sattvic, rajasic and tamasic. So, a rajasic mind may convert challenge into competition, urgency and irritability. A tamasic mind may convert the same challenge into avoidance, hopelessness or numbness. But a sattvic mind sees the challenge with proportion and lucidity. So, emotionally intelligent man is someone who has a sattvic mind. Ayurveda enriches this further through embodied temperaments. Well, I refer to medieval alchemy in which they talked about certain humors and the proportion of humors in the composition of someone's body element. Even in our Hindu dharma we believe Chitjal Pavaka Gagana Samira Panch Tattva Mil Bana Sarira. Our life is made of different elements, as many as 5 elements. Likewise, in Ayurveda, it is believed that we are governed by one of these 3 traits. There may be excess of Vata, Vata is wind, Pitta that is bile, and Kapha, Kapha everybody knows. And in what proportion we have this, which one is dominant in our body will also affect our temperament. So, Vata dominant individuals may lean toward anxiety, unpredictability and overthinking. Pitta dominant temperaments may show perfectionism, sharpness, anger, intensity. Likewise, Kapha dominant personalities may hold emotion deeply, leading to attachment, resistance to change or silent accumulation. So, in what proportion these things are there in our temperament will determine our behavior pattern as well. When we talk about Buddhistic psychology, it offers one of the most refined analysis of emotional life by shifting our attention from the emotion as story to the moment of its arising. The key concept here is Vedana, that moment of feeling, the immediate feeling tone of experience, pleasant, unpleasant or neutral. Buddhist emotional intelligence lies in learning to notice this pre-conceptual threshold. The next stage is called Trishna, that is craving. The doctrine of dependent origination makes this explicit. Feeling when not clearly seen gives rise to craving. Pleasant feeling must continue, unpleasant feeling must end, neutral feeling must become stimulating. This is how we react to this. What is the antidote? How to come out of it? The antidote is upekha or equanimity, not indifference. It is not indifference, but a lucid, non-clinging awareness that allows emotions to arise and pass without egoic appropriation. The Sati Patthana tradition in Sati Patthana Sutra in Buddhistic psychology repeatedly emphasizes observing arising and vanishing. It talks about body, feeling, mind, it talks about the different stages that have to be followed in order to understand our emotions, channelize them, regulate them or allow them to become part of our nature. Detached observation is balanced by karuna, that is compassion, the capacity to remain tenderly aware of suffering without being consumed by it. All of us know that yes, we feel pain when we receive some sad news, but then should we allow that sad news to consume us, to finish us, or should we suffer it and then after some time should come out of it. So, one of the most profound contributions of Indian approaches to emotional intelligence lies in how they rethink the meaning of what we initially call bad, painful or unfortunate. Ability to bounce back from a situation that was thought to be impossible to come out. Now, that inner strength is what makes us emotionally intelligent. The immediate human tendency is to label loss, rejection, failure, heartbreak, illness, humiliation or uncertainty as absolute dukh. We think that everything is lost now, I have nothing to live for, as experiences that must only be resisted, lamented or escaped. Yet Indian philosophy repeatedly complicates this first reaction by distinguishing the fact of pain from the meaning we continue to give it. At the same time, we must remain ethically careful. Indian wisdom should never be reduced to the cruel simplification that every misfortune is merely your karma or something one somehow deserved. No, the Indian philosophy does believe in karma, but still it does not allow us to be fatalists. Such readings can erase structural injustice, grief, trauma, or the genuine randomness of life's wounds. The Indian philosophy also says that yes, you have to stand against structural injustice. It is not that you suffer in silence and become part of it. A more responsible philosophical reading asks instead, how does the way I meet this experience shape the kind of self I become? Learning from every emotional crisis. This is where emotional intelligence becomes a matter of character. What transforms it is Viveka, discernment, the capacity to reinterpret pain without falsifying it. Indian emotional intelligence offers a more spacious response, not denial, not toxic positivity. What is toxic positivity? When we become too positive and start rationalizing something which is structurally wrong or unjust, and certainly not karmic blame. Now, blaming that this is my fate, I may have committed some crime in the previous birth, so I am suffering, and suffering in silence without doing anything to avert it, that is not what is expected. But the disciplined question of what this experience is revealing about attachment, expectation, ego and resilience. Can this wound become a site of deeper discernment rather than a prison of self definition? What can we learn from this? Can we allow it to spoil us forever? Or should we learn from it and do the needful? So, friends, I leave you with this very pertinent question, and your right answer to this question will determine whether you are emotionally intelligent or otherwise. Thank you very much for your kind attention.